thanks to the support as a channel member, Ole Gunnar Kvam. Well, we're going into the final 2 days of the season, and I have no idea if we're going to be able to qualify for the Champions League or not, but what I am fairly confident about is that if we don't qualify for the Champions League, we're going to have some financial problems. Hello and welcome to part 138 of Wembley to Wembley. I'm Kevin. Coming up on today's episode, we have our final 2 games of the Premier League season. We're at home against Manchester City and away against Sheffield Wednesday. Since you were last with me, we have managed to turn around our little wobble that saw us fall out of the Champions League and miss out on the top 4 in the Champions League as well. We've won 3 straight games against teams in a relegation battle. They were the right games at the right time, which means the Premier League table looks like this. We've got 2 games remaining. We can't catch Liverpool, who are above us and have a game in hand anyway. But Chelsea can't catch us because we've got a game in hand on them. So we know we're finishing 5th. The jeopardy, boys and girls, comes from, does that get us in the Champions League? I just don't know. If it doesn't, we have a problem because the projections, I mean, actually, they look a little bit better now than they did before, but we don't really trust projections in Football Manager. I think these projections are based on us continuing to do next season what we've done this season, which effectively means it's based on us being in the Champions League. If we're not in the Champions League, money becomes problematic, despite the fact that we still pay very little in terms of salary compared to everybody else in the league. If we have a look at the salary per annum, we spend £58 million a year on salaries. To be fair, Everton 61, Middlesbrough 67. We're not like 10 times below everybody at this point. We're not a million miles away from most of the bottom half of the table. Obviously, if you compare us to the top half, we're still well off the pace. We finished 5th last year. We finished 5th this year. We're doing that on a budget 4 or 5 times smaller than the teams we're competing with, but we don't want to get stuck down the bottom end of the table. We don't want financial problems. Financial problems sound poopy. I think that's a fair description of them. They will be poopy if they occur. Worryingly, I think that's a pretty accurate sign of it. The fact that the board are saying minimum transfer budget for next season is £0. I think they're basically on a similar thought process to me. If we get in the Champions League, they'll give me a budget. If we don't, maybe they won't. And I don't know that we can continue building the team if we have no money to build the team with. This is the team for the game against Manchester City. Why is my hair flopping forward? What's going on? It's time for a haircut, boys and girls. It's Beswick in goal, a back 4 of Nguesen, Moulemans, Agume and Vaughan, Fanamo and Christodoulou in midfield, Renault, Ansong and Paranos behind Belkacemi up front. Get the team out there. Manchester City are one of the best teams in the league. They've already qualified for the Champions League. I don't think they can win the Premier League. I think Newcastle have already retained their Premier League title. They have. But City can still finish above what I say. No, they are 10 points behind. They've got 3 games left to play. They can still finish above Wolves and should still finish above Wolves. And to be fair, even if we beat them here, should still finish above Wolves. So there's not really any incentive for them in beating us. There's no benefit to them. They're probably going to finish 2nd regardless of what happens here. But then at the same time, we're definitely going to finish 5th regardless of what happens here. So despite it looking like a fairly juicy game towards the end of the season when the fixtures were announced, and even when I was planning when to put my episode, it's effectively a little bit of a dead rubber that we are going to use in terms of I guess planning for next season. We'll have a conversation. We haven't had a chatty conversation, do a bit of planning episode for a little while because there's been so much at stake for so many seasons now. But we kind of do need to be thinking in terms of what still needs to be done for this team. We've got 1 more year still playing at the Gavin Rose Stadium and presumably at Stamford Bridge in Europe. And then we move into our new ground. The new ground is going to have a 26,000 capacity unless that changes between now and then, which is 10,000 less than we got turn up at Stamford Bridge for our last home game in the Champions League. So it's a stadium that probably is going to need to immediately expand. There is excitement around Wembley FC. So I think we're probably going to be, just as soon as we're in the ground, probably operating on a smaller capacity while we extend it. We'll probably get straight on with trying to extend it if the board are on board with that. So financially, we're probably going to be a little bit limited even once we move in, because we'll probably be playing in front of, let's say, maybe 18 to 20,000 people while we're filling the corners in, putting another tier on whatever we do to expand the stadium. But that, of course, does almost quadruple our match day income. Hopefully we get some increased sponsorship income now. Our reputation's rising. We've had a good run in the Champions League to the quarterfinal. So hopefully that will lead to more sponsors coming in. We are still well clear at the bottom of the sponsorship table in the Premier League, despite finishing 5th 2 seasons in a row. So that's something that hopefully can be resolved, but that does take time to resolve. So all of that kind of leaves us in a little bit of no man's land when it comes to the playing squad. And it is kind of dependent on whether we get a budget or not. If we get a budget, then I suggest we continue investing in young, talented players. I think we've got a core of a good enough team now to not need to go out and buy any more like 26, 27-year-old first team ready players. I think we've probably got enough of that kind of player at the club to be okay without buying any more. So we can probably focus on bringing in more younger players, which is what we were doing, or what we've tried to do in both of the last 2 windows. We've ended up kind of doing a bit of that and a bit of bringing in players who are ready, like Meulemans, as an example. Fanamo, 12 goals this season. I tell you what, these corners, he's been quite the threat from the corners. He is. I think Williams has got about 14 goals, and then Paranos has got maybe 16, 17. Fanamo is right up there as one of our top scorers. I'm crediting it with his conversion to a midfielder. It's more to do with the fact that we've got good at doing set pieces. We've got players who can actually hit a decent corner now. Because obviously he was here last year, not scoring that many corners. But he is making a difference from them this year, which is jolly nice. There you go, make our final 2 changes. We're going to stay on attacking. We're going to try and win the game. But yeah, so if we get a budget, I think we focus on bringing in a few more younger players. If we don't get a budget, I think we do still need to work on bringing in new players. I don't think we can just rest with what we've got and be like, well, it's finished 5th this year. We don't need to add to it. I think if we don't get any kind of budget, we're still on 100% retained transfer revenue. That's when we have to maybe consider selling somebody. That's a big miss from Lambert. It was another well-worked set piece, a long throw this time. They've been a threat all season long as well. And Lambert has missed an absolute sitter. That was the opportunity to give us the win over City in our final home game of the season. It wasn't to be. Right, we will get to Sheffield and then we'll continue our chat. So we've talked about what happens if we get into the Champions League. Now, what happens if we don't? It's just a one change to the team that played the last game. Rob Williams comes in on the right side. He's joining us permanently in the summer. And just before we get into the game, I wanted to show you just how many of our players are wanted by other clubs. It is a lot of them are wanted by other clubs. Quite a few of them wanted by Saudi Arabian clubs that we're just not going to be able to compete with financially. So that kind of leads to what the plan becomes if we don't get in the Champions League, because I think it's a two-pronged thing. Prong number one, we still want to be able to buy. So in order to buy, we're going to have to sell. So we're going to have to pick some of maybe the higher value ones, 1 or 2, someone like a Belkacemi maybe. We could move on. If we get 30 or 40 million pounds for him, that then is a budget that we can use to reinvest in a replacement for him and 3 or 4 young players to go into other positions as well. But we also have to face the prospect of, if we're not in the Champions League, we might have players who want to leave and are going to force through moves to bigger clubs because our reputation is still low. As shown by the fact that we're losing against bottom of the table and already relegated Sheffield Wednesday. Our reputation is still low. And if we've not got the Champions League to kind of bolster the reputation, we might see the likes of Fanamo, Christodoulou, Vaughan, some of our more talented younger players who've got the potential to play in the Champions League or at least play in Europe of some flavour or not next season. We might see them force moves through to try and, earn some more money by going to Saudi Arabia because they can pay the kind of salaries we could never even dream of, or just get a higher quality of football, whether it's playing with a squad that's got a better chance of winning the Premier League, playing in a squad that's in the Champions League, or a better chance of winning the Europa League. There's so many factors that come into play if it looks like we're starting to decline, if we've hit our peak, because last year finished 5th, this year finished 5th, so that's fine. But we got in the Champions League last year. If we don't get in the Champions League this year, that does look like the first ever season of decline that we've had in the save. And we don't know how loyal all these boys are because they've only ever been with us on an upward trajectory. I'd like to think Christodoulou, for example, understands that he's a Wembley lifer. I hope he understands that, because I don't think he gets the same game time and the same opportunity anywhere else in the Premier League as he does with us. He gets it with us because he's homegrown at club, because we love him, because he's our boy, because he's been with us since he was 17 years old. We're always going to favour him. He's probably not the best Segundo Volante that we could pick, that we could get in this team. I could probably go out and buy another Belgian now who would potentially be better than him just on a like direct comparison player for player, but they wouldn't be Christodoulou. So he gets the Christodoulou benefit of just being him, and he won't get that anywhere else. But if you look on his preferences, he is an Arsenal fan. He came through the Arsenal youth system. Wembley is still not on his favourite clubs list. So if he were to get the opportunity to, for example, return to Arsenal, I think he probably goes, no matter what's gone on at Wembley. And then we're stuck in a pickle of having to replace him, whilst also continuing to improve and build the rest of the team around him. He's certainly not one that I would choose to let go. If we end up in the Europa League and needing to sell, I'm thinking Belkacemi is an obvious one to let go. Possibly one of the defenders. Obviously, we've got a lot of very good defenders: Fanamo, Agume, Moulemans. What's his face? The other guy who begins with B, whose name escapes me. What is his name? Brewers. We've got Buriak, who we signed in January, who's barely played. We could probably let one or two of those centre-backs go for probably quite decent money. So there's areas I would sell long before letting Christodoulou leave. But we might not get the choice. So lots of stuff to think about going into that transfer window. I will be checking in on the European coefficient before the end of the episode. I'm not going to wait for the announcement, but we will see what our budget is, hopefully, at the end of the episode, unless it's delayed, pending what competition we end up in. But we checked in on the European coefficient in the last episode and saw that England were still ahead of Spain at that point. So if we're still ahead of Spain now with only the finals to play, we'll check who's in the finals, and fingers crossed, we'll get our answer before it's even official. If there's an English team in the Europa League final, no Spanish team in the Champions League final, and England are still ahead of Spain on the coefficient, then I think at that point we're fairly confident that we're probably going to be in the Champions League with a 5th place finish. The one question mark comes, and I don't know what the rule is here, so it might be a lovely surprise if there is an English team in the Europa League final who are not currently in the top 4 in the Premier League and they win it. Can we get 6 teams in the Champions League if we don't win the Champions League? Because last year the reason there was 6 teams in is because English teams won both the Europa League and the Champions League. No English team could win the Champions League this year. So in that circumstance, can we still get 6? Or if, for example, Arsenal win the Europa League, those 4 go in, Arsenal go in as Europa League winners, do we get the 6th spot? Does the 6th spot exist? And I don't know the answer. Right, let's bring Paranos on as the final change. And it's been relatively comfortable here against Sheffield Wednesday, as you would imagine, after that early scare. And there is your confirmation of our 5th place finish, actually with a better goal difference than Liverpool above us, Wolves above us. If a couple of those frustrating results had gone our way over the course of the season, we wouldn't be having this worry. Certainly, if we hadn't have been in the Champions League this year, we'd have finished top 4, absolutely no problem. 18 goals for Paranos. What a signing he has been. If we can pick up a couple more like him on a free transfer, because remember him, Balkasemi, who else? Pep was a free transfer. Renault was a free transfer. We picked up some good free transfers last summer. So that's another area for us to explore as we have throughout the save. But for now, we've confirmed our 5th place finish. I think we probably have our budgets in here. Let's see what the board think. And then we can check the coefficients. So we'll give Williams a pat on the head. I don't even know which Williams I'm patting there. We've got 30 million for the Premier League. Confirmation we're in the Europa League. Is Champions League still pending? That's what I need to know. So we've not been given budgets yet. That's my leftover budget from this season. Let's just check the coefficient, which I think to get to, you go here. So as it stands at the moment, England well ahead on the 5-year average. But this season, it's done on this season. So England and Germany well clear of Spain and France. I don't know when the points get allocated. So if we look at the Champions League final is Leipzig versus Milan. So no Spain there. I think we're probably safe, depending on what happens in the Europa League, where it's a Liverpool-Man City final. So it's definitely an English team winning the Europa League, but both of those teams have already qualified for the Champions League through the league. I think we're in the Champions League. Let's press continue. See if we get budgets. See if we get any kind of confirmation along those lines. Budgets. Right, we've got our budgets. Come on board. Oh, Stockport have broken our record. That's nice. Seems unnecessary. Right. I want this to be, these budgets, for me to be happy, I want like 30 or 40 million and 1.8 million wage budget. You know what? 1.5 million pound wage budget, a 60 million transfer budget. If we convert that, that's almost exactly what I've asked for, I think. I mean, that is pretty much exactly what I asked for. 45 million transfer budget, 1.8 million wage budget. And I think we're in the Champions League. We're going to have a fun summer, everybody. If you enjoyed that, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for me. Subscribe to the channel for daily Football Manager videos. And thank you very much for watching.